Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Michelle Chula-Lipkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. And I want to welcome everyone to the closing event of the 6th Annual U.S. Media Literacy Week. The purpose of Media Literacy Week is to highlight the work of media literacy educators and organizations, and also to increase the public's awareness of media literacy education. The role that media literacy can play in protecting our democracy is becoming clearer every day. And we have a moral imperative to improve our educational system so that students gain the skills they need to succeed in the digital world. Media Literacy Week gives us a chance to shine the light on its importance. And it has been an incredible week, our biggest US Media Literacy Week yet, with almost 500 participants from 44 states and 36 countries. I want to take a moment to thank NAMLE's Associate Director, Danelle Probst, and Program Assistant, Kyle Plants, for their efforts and countless hours leading up to and during Media Literacy Week. I also want to thank the NAMLE Board of Directors for their support of this important initiative, and all our partners, members, and followers near and far who have organized events, promoted events, attended events, and joined us this week. The title of this event is Youth Civic Engagement in the Digital Age, and I am so proud that NAMLE has partnered with our dear friends at PBS Student Reporting Labs and Circle, the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. Both of these organizations are leaders in their respective fields and my personal go-to when it comes to best practice in engaging youth with media and understanding youth civic engagement. I want to thank Elise Estrada, Abby Kisa, and Peter de Guzman for working with us over the last several months to bring this event together. We have a jammed 90 minutes for you. Let me quickly run through the agenda. We are going to start with a conversation with a student and teacher from a high school in Philadelphia, followed by a panel led by our friends at Circle with members of their Youth Advisory Council rep-ups. I will then turn to PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs to talk about their work before turning it over to Malik Mercier, host of GBH's Internet Expert, and a panel of students. And we will end the event with a call to action for all of us as we head into Election Day. This event is anchored by the intersection of media literacy education and civic engagement. And in an article she co-wrote in 2018, Abby Kisa, Director of Impact at Circle, stated, "Unifying media literacy and civic engagement reinforces the reality that civic media and information about public issues exists for a purpose: expression, discussion, and informed action. Furthermore, centering the voices of youth at this intersection positions young people as civic actors, while centering media literacy as a critical civic skill. Young people deserve to be treated as agents of change in our communities, and our democracy needs them." We meet today, just days away from Election Day, an Election Day that is more anticipated than any I have ever lived through. And youth voice will play a huge part. And Circle shared their last data this morning about absentee and early voting by youth in 2020 election. And let me share some of the data. So more than 7 million young people ages 18 to 29 have already voted, early or absentee, in the 2020 election, including over 4 million in 14 key states that may well decide the presidency and control of the US Senate. In every state that Circle is tracking, the number of absentee and early votes cast as of 7 days before Election Day is far higher than at the same point in 2016. And the numbers are especially dramatic in a state like Texas, where more than 1 million young people have already cast ballots, nearly approaching the 1.2 million total votes cast by youth, both early on and on Election Day in 2016. Youth voice is being heard, and let's continue the conversation here today. So we are going to start with a short video from PBS Student Reporting Labs, and then we'll go to our conversation.
democracy does mean a type of government that's ran by the people. So it's incredibly important that the administration is listening to the people.
Democracy to me does mean freedom. And while, again, it's not always fair, it's more free than any other system I can think of.
In 2020, democracy means an unquestionable election, having people come together and say, we trust the election, we're not going to dispute it.
Well, I think democracy should be a place where everybody's voice is heard, like nobody is marginalized.
People lost what the meaning of democracy really is, and they just believe what a random news site tells them.
Democracy to me means that the people, the voice of the people matters. It's a real thing. We definitely have made progress.
I think democracy in 2020 is very much about accessibility, lower income neighborhoods having access to polling offices and having enough resources for education on politics.
Democracy means what it always has meant, which is letting the people run the United States.
To represent the people and to make them happy, and that is the ideal system.
Democracy is to take consideration for the people that you represent.
Democracy is the most important expression of the American dream.
Thank you for that wonderful video. So I'd like to now welcome our first guests, Joshua McCuff and Gregory Smith from the W.B. Saul School of Agricultural Science in Philadelphia. Hi there. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having both of us.
So my first question for you is, how are you doing? How are you doing learning and teaching during this incredibly stressful year and the pandemic? How are things going, Mr. Smith?
You know, it's very unusual, largely because I don't have the interaction that I normally have with my student. What's most challenging is that barrier, you know, having them in their own location, a lot of times not turning on their videos. So I feel like I'm just talking to a screen and hoping I'm engaging my students. It only occurs when there's feedback that I actually know that they're getting something out of it. Otherwise, I'm just in my room by myself, kind of speaking to a screen.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers can relate to that. Josh, how has it been for you? Like, how has it been engaging this way with your teachers?
Well, working from home for me has been really difficult because it's nothing like being in an actual school environment. It's difficult because sometimes I have a hard time focusing because I'm not in a, it's like I'm not in a professional environment.
Yeah, I can see that. So I want to go to democracy, as we just saw in the video. And I know that's a big turn from online learning. But Josh, can you tell me what democracy means to you?
Sure. To be a democracy means to have the freedom to vote and pick our elected officials, to represent us in a fair election, and to be able to protest and take a stand for the common good. Not only that, but to be able to publicly use your voice, excuse me. It should mean that the government should be for the people and not the other way around, and that like we should all be able to work together.
That's wonderful. I love that sentiment. Mr. Smith, how do you teach and promote democracy in your classroom?
Well, you know, I don't teach history or civics. I teach natural resource management, environmental science. And there's a lot of opportunity for me to integrate political topics without being political. For instance, climate change is something that's affecting all of us. And I just provide lots of facts about greenhouse gases, ways to reduce your carbon footprint. We talk about municipal waste management. We even addressed wildlife preservation, all of which have some form of policy or law associated with them. So I encourage my kids to be advocates for the planets as well as advocates for themselves. And by having that voice and having a foundation and understanding, they can make decisions. My school, we encourage all of our students to register to vote, even if they're not 18 yet. We make sure that they fill out the voter registration, and we will make sure that we submit it by the time they are 18 so that they can participate in the next election. So the combination of including those topics in my class and then also reinforcing the importance of voting, hopefully they put the two together and realize that they go hand in hand, and your voice matters, particularly when it comes to my class with environmental issues.
That's great. And Josh, you're in that class?
Yes, I am. I
I
am in his ed class, yes.
I imagine Mr. Smith seems like a very engaging teacher. I bet you that's one class that you could get a lot out of.
It definitely is. We actually learned a lot from our sophomore year going into our senior year. So we were really lucky to have him as a teacher.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fact that we're heading into election day, Josh. What is on the minds of you and your peers as we go in? I mean, there's so much conversation happening out there, but what's on your mind and your friends?
I feel as though my peers and I are mostly worried about who will be elected. Also the fact that the election could be botched in some way, shape, or form, and that overall it just won't be a fair election.
Tell me why you think that it might, like, where are you getting that thought or that anxiety about it being botched?
Um, we feel as though it could be botched because due to the recent like over mailing of the ballots and stuff and somehow like people don't really know how to do that per se. So there could be an overcount for votes and stuff and just an undercount too.
So, Mr. Smith, so speaking off of like kind of responding to what Josh was saying, how do you kind of guide your students through this like information overload and showing them where you can find reliable information about all things, but even about voting and elections? Because that is obviously vital for people to really understand what the issues are with voting today and what is just, kind of fear mongering. How do you help them how do you guide them?
Yeah, so what I do specifically is my class is a project service-based class. And I require my students to do a lot of research. And the foundation of research for me is understanding how to find credible information. We're in Pennsylvania and many of our students end up going to Penn State. So I use the same standard that Penn State Library uses for finding credible resources, whether it's video, an article, or even sussing out if a blog is actually written by somebody who has experience and knowledge in the area versus, some kid in Nebraska who just happened to do a report and the report was required to be a blog and then just taking information from that. So I really encourage them to figure out where their source is coming from, who is writing it, and is there any biases that you see? And if it passes that check for my class, hopefully they also do the same thing when it comes to researching on their own.
Great. So Josh, how do you get your information? Where are you going for news and, general information about what's going on in the world? Like, what's your go-to?
I usually since I'm not able to vote yet, I usually get information from my family. My grandmother is actually pretty huge on voting, so I get most of my information from her. Whenever she's watching the news or something, I'll also sit in to listen because I feel as though that if I'm educated enough, I will know in the upcoming or the next election who and what to look for in a candidate.
It's great. Let's talk a little bit about how we do become an informed citizen and what it even means to be an informed citizen. So, Mr. Smith, how can you even answer that in this day and age? Like, what is it to be an informed citizen?
I feel like it's very challenging to be an informed citizen. I will say since the pandemic started, I have become obsessed with the news channels. And as a result, I'm just inundated with so much information. So a lot for me on a personal level is just determining what is it that aligns with my core beliefs. And I kind of am using my gut instincts going into this election, saying, here are the things that I believe in. These are the issues that I'm most concerned with. Which of our options best fits my needs? And neither are perfect, but one is going to fit my needs better than others. So in talking even to my students, and we oftentimes get very, very off topic. And I appreciate those times when we get off topic because there is an opportunity to kind of influence my own thought processes of make this decision on your own. And then going back to what I said before is always know where you're getting your information from. And social media, shouldn't be your primary source. At some point, read the newspaper, look up online from credible sources, go actually to the source itself versus hearsay from another person.
Yeah. I appreciate when I do get the opportunity to teach. I find the best moments are often in when you go off topic, right? We learn the most from those moments. So last question, Josh, if you could, tell first-time voters today, like one message, like what do you want first-time voters to be thinking about this election season?
I guess it would be to go off of what Mr. Smith is saying. Make sure that you're well educated on the topic and or who you're voting for, because I feel as though that will play a huge part in the election.
Great. How about you, Mr. Smith? Final thought.
Final thought, I feel that this election is setting us up for all future election. I remember when I was in college, there was such a huge push with things like Rock the Vote and a lot of celebrities really getting out and promoting it. It kind of tapered off. And I suddenly see this upswell. And I'm hoping that this election is proof that whether it's a primary election or a general election or your local election, that you're just going to take it serious no matter what. Every election is serious. More so than anything, your local election is probably more crucial to your individual actions than the national one. So really start paying attention to the local, to your state, and then obviously become engaged in the federal level elections as well.
Thank you for those thoughts. Well, thank you both for being here and for all that you do every day in the classroom with your learning and your teaching. Thank you. And please stay around so we can bring you back at the end, and please get involved with the chat. So thank you very much for being here. And so now I'm going to bring up the Circle team for their portion of the event. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much. And thank you to the folks at PBS Student Reporting Labs as well.
Thank you, guys. Hi, Abby. Okay, great. So I'm going to leave you to do what you do, and I'll be back in a little bit.
Great. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Friday of Media Literacy Week. We're really excited to be in conversation with you around these very important topics. I'm going to share my screen right now. So my name is Peter de Guzman, and I'm the Research Program Coordinator at CIRCLE, which is the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement. So CIRCLE is a nonpartisan research center located at the Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts, and we focus on understanding youth civic engagement for a more equitable democracy. I'm really happy to be joined today by my colleague Abby Kisa, as well as a few members of the Rep Us Project's Youth Advisory Group. The Rep Us project looks into the relationship between youth media and electoral participation to understand how including diverse youth voices can expand the youth electorate. So I'm going to ask everyone to introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, the state you're calling in from, and your class year, if applicable. So I'm going to start with Abby.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Kisa, and I'm a coworker of Peter's at CIRCLE. Really want to thank PBS Student Reporting Labs and NAMLE for co-hosting this event with us. And I'm going to hit it over to Atticus to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Atticus. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a senior at Essex High School in Vermont.
Great. Next, how about Raven?
Hi, I'm Raven. She, her pronouns. I'm a sophomore at Hendrix College, and I will pass it on to Madison.
Hi, I'm Madison. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a freshman at NYU.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're gonna open up this conversation with a question. We're actually gonna post a link in the chat so that folks in the chat can also join us via Padlet. But we're gonna start off with our Rep Us members. So the question is, on which social media platforms are you seeing information about the elections? And if you could talk about some of the common themes that you're seeing.
Peter, I just wanted to weigh in to say that you sent the link to, oh, never mind. I'm gonna just leave you alone.
No worries. Yeah, we're all struggling here, I think, with some technology. But if people in the chat, I see someone has already responded. But if Madison, Raven, or Atticus, if you want to jump on this question over the mic about what social media platforms you're seeing information about the election, and maybe what themes are you seeing?
I'll just say that I'm seeing I'm seeing information on almost every social media platform, specifically asking you to go and vote. So there's a big push to vote. I'm not necessarily seeing like representative information on all platforms, but definitely the push to vote.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of energy about that. Atticus, did you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, sure. Definitely all social media platforms, but I feel like young people are mostly just on Instagram, I feel like. So that's where I've kind of seen the majority of people engaging. And I think a lot of what I've seen too is interestingly one side against the other, pushing people to vote, but less about maybe the actual issues and more about why you should vote for one candidate.
That's really interesting. Like not as much positive messaging, but maybe a little bit more negative or combative messaging. Madison, how about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I agree. It's mostly I'm seeing stuff on Instagram, but also like YouTube and other things like that that are posting like trying to get people to actually focus on the issues again, because as we know, the election has kind of been more about like the character of them and not like their position. So I've been seeing a lot more like get out and vote and like this is what you're actually voting for and trying to refocus on the issues.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. There definitely is that tension there. And I'm seeing on the Padlet right now, we're seeing people say TikTok, Twitter, all of them, Instagram. So there's definitely a diversity there. So going back, in 2020, we're really seeing that young people are seeing information about the election on these multiple media platforms that folks in the chat also mentioned. So this summer in May and June, we conducted national youth polling, and we see that the percentage of young people who said that they have seen information about the election on each of these platforms has increased from our poll in September 2018, which is our pre-election poll for that midterm election. So we see that for the 18 to 24 age group here, 51% of young people said they have seen information on Instagram about the election, and about half of young people say the same for Twitter. We also see young people getting election-related news from Facebook, Snapchat, and Reddit. And when we turn to TikTok, which is mentioned the least frequently out of these, we still see that more young people in this age group of 18 to 24 are saying that they had information they received information from TikTok than the percentage that said in 2018 they received information from Twitter. So really a huge increase here across platforms. But one thing we also want to mention is that we're seeing disparities in who is seeing political content, despite many young people getting information from a variety of sources. So we see that young women tend to see youth-created political content at a similar frequency, despite differences in race and ethnicity. But although young Black and young white men create and post content at the same rates, we're seeing that the young white men are much more likely to frequently see content created by other young people. So this is really important to understand that these social media spaces are not really representing everyone equally. I'm going to turn to the next question on Padlet, which I'll post in the chat, and also want to toss this over. It was mentioned a little bit before from the panelists, Josh and other folks, about the issues that you're seeing represented. And I'm going to post one here. So I'm curious, maybe Madison, if you want to start off with this one, what issues are you seeing discussed the most by other young people on social media this year?
I think that it's like I said before, it's been really hard to like have people focus on the issues. So it's mostly been like seeing a lot of issues of like Black Lives Matter and like gender equality and all those things.
Right, definitely. There's both those issues there, but also people focusing on other things. And Black Lives Matter as well as gender equality were also issues that were mentioned in our poll. So racism was actually an issue that was mentioned in the top 3 for young people about their issues determining their vote. So definitely something we'll add on to later. Atticus, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely think I've seen Black Lives Matter kind of dominate the last few months. I think young people, of course, still care about other issues such as, what am I saying? I'm seeing like climate change in there. But people just aren't posting about it as much, it feels like, and it's more of taken like a back burner.
Interesting. Raven, how about you? What issues are you seeing young people post about on social media this year?
At this moment, I'm seeing a lot of mental health issues coming up just because of online school, and then also the weight of the Black Lives Matter movement, and just how it seems that the world is kind of placing a lot of responsibility on young people at this moment to kind of change the environment that's happening in the world.
Right, definitely. We're seeing a lot of messaging around that. Around this is the year, young people are supposed to make their voice heard, despite the many barriers to access. I'm seeing here on this Padlet that there are a lot of different issues represented, which I think really points to the diversity in issues that young people care about, which is really interesting to hear. So we're seeing reflected on this Padlet, we're seeing young people post about COVID-19, climate change, feminist issues, racism, as well as Black Lives Matter and gender equality. Great. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and toss it over to Atticus, who's going to present a little bit about our data on the issues in 2020.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Peter. So we kind of just touched on a lot of this, but in Circle's youth poll this year, young people identified kind of their top 3 issues as the environment, racism, and healthcare, and that's like looking forward to the 2020 election. Then also getting back to normal after the pandemic, and concerns about police mistreatment of communities of color were also like very highly ranked. And something that's kind of interesting about this data is no single issue was chosen as the most important by more than 15% of all youth. And this kind of demonstrates that young people do really care about a really large variety of issues, and their views can't be like categorized as all having the same. Personally, something I've kind of noticed, I started talking about this a minute ago, is I feel like almost a little counterintuitive to the large variety of issues, is I've seen people really mostly posting about Black Lives Matter and racial inequality in our country. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all. I think it's just kind of where the focus has been lately. And I think people are still talking about like the environment and healthcare, but those conversations more happening off to the side or kind of personally. And I think Raven, you actually started to talk about this a little bit, but there is a bit of this like pressure on youth, right, to kind of like speak up and be a big part of the movement. And I think that's why we're seeing maybe, or at least I'm seeing people post more about Black Lives Matter, because that's kind of what the main issue of like this summer has been. And then interestingly, I'm also seeing a lot of people who maybe before would never have posted on social media are suddenly really engaging, or people who were engaged are already like really stepping up and suddenly becoming way more engaged. Personally, I think that's been a really nice thing. Despite the pressure, it's nice to see people feel like they can maybe voice some of their opinions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Does someone else want to comment on that, about this sense of pressure maybe being a motivating force, or how do you feel about that?
I know that I personally experience sometimes with conversations with family members that are maybe a bit more distant from me, so maybe not my direct family members, but a lot of times they'll say to me, well, it's your responsibility now, or they'll mention something of like, you have the ability to change things that we can no longer do. And so it's become something that's so stuck in my brain, of just this responsibility that I feel that multiple people just experience, being told that, this is your time to take the reins of the world sort of experience.
That's interesting, right? It seems like it's really entered the national conversation, in a year where young people are expected to have a lot of engagement. We're seeing already in early voting that young people are really engaged in the electoral process, but there also is that pressure there. So I want to ask all our RepUs members a question here, and we've kind of touched upon this issue already, but I'm really interested to hear a little bit more in depth about your experience creating digital media about social and political issues this year, and how it's made you feel beyond just what issues you're engaging with. So I'm going to toss it over to Madison first, if you want to comment on this question.
Yeah, I've kind of been doing, as I think like a lot of people have, way more engagement with like social media and just creating things around social issues these past few years. Um, and it's been really interesting because I feel like it's a good way to like uh, get my opinion out, and I definitely feel less frustrated than I did originally, which I think is good. Um, and yeah, I guess that's it.
That's great. Atticus, how about you?
Yeah, I've definitely feel like I've been engaging more, trying to like post stuff on my story. Also, outside of social media, I definitely been trying to kind of have more political conversations than I probably would have before, which I feel is equally as important.
Definitely, yeah. We're definitely seeing a lot of engagement in many multiple ways. How about you, Raven? How do you feel about this?
I personally get really stressed when I think about making media to post online because it really scares me to, post misinformation or in any form. And so I really have to sit and think about what I'm trying to say, my intent, why I'm saying it, and how I'm saying it before I post it.
That's a really good point. I think some of you have mentioned, this increased attention on young people's voice, but with it also comes responsibility, right? Because you don't want to be the person putting out that misinformation and confusing your peers or other people that are listening to you. So I'm going to toss it over to Abby, who's going to talk a little bit about, the impacts of creating digital media from our survey data.
Thanks so much, Peter. So speaking, and thank you to Raven, Atticus, and Madison. So we just talked a little bit about young people's media creation, right? Sharing your experiences, sharing your stories online, right? Or even creating calls to action and putting them online. And so I want to share a little bit more about what we've learned about that this year in particular, right? And as people have said, is particularly unique year and where we've seen a lot of youth leadership. So we've seen that of those young people who said that they have created media or have created content this year, nearly 2/3 agree that they see positive results in themselves as a result of that. So creating social media posts or online content about political or social issues helps young people feel like their voices matter. So, and this isn't entirely surprising. An earlier analysis that we did at Circle showed that young people who engage in political action online, right, like signing petitions or something like that, are actually more likely to feel empowered to engage in person as well. So there isn't this sort of like split that people talk about sometimes. But these benefits of posting online and creating media about political and social issues are not consistent across all young people. And that's something that we find about lots and lots of different forms of civic engagement. We find that young men are more likely than young women to agree that they feel more informed as a result of creating media and content. And young women and white women are 20 percentage points more likely than young Black women to agree that they feel more informed about politics and civics as a result of creating content on social media. And then when we look at some of the other questions we asked about whether or not people felt informed, whether or not they felt more powerful as a result of expressing their opinions online or putting other media online. And we also asked people whether or not they felt more represented. And so one of the other things we found was that actually young Black women are slightly more likely than young white women to agree that their voice feels more powerful due to creating media and content, putting it online. And actually young men are more likely than young white men are more likely than young Black men to agree with the same statement. So this really highlights that digital platforms, social media, creating content to put online, regardless of whether or not it's telling a story, expressing an opinion, or doing a lot of research on an issue, right, and putting it online, that it's not a fully equitable space, and that different young people have really different access and different experiences online.
Thank you so much for sharing out about that, Abby. I think it's really beyond the issues that young people are talking about. I think it's also really interesting and important to talk about, the impact of having those discussions. So I'm going to go back to another Padlet. I just posted the link in the chat, and this is what I'm really interested in hearing more about. So first for our Rep Us panel, I'm curious, has something motivated you to voice your opinion on political issues online this year? And if you could talk a little bit about what that was.
I can talk about it for a sec. I think honestly, just things that make me angry, right? Like whatever I feel are injustices in the world and things that I maybe don't have a lot of control on, but I really want to express my opinion on. I think that's kind of the main motivator, as it is, I feel like, for a lot of people.
Right, definitely making your voice heard. How about you, Raven?
Yeah, I was gonna say injustices. Whenever we had a Black Lives Matter rally in Tulsa, which is where I'm from, I participated, and I remember like I was very motivated to discuss and to post about the injustices that I saw going around the rally and also the aftermath of such. So I don't know exactly how that plays into directly what motivates me, but I'd probably say the same with Atticus, it's the injustices.
That's really interesting because Atticus kind of, I feel like, touched upon earlier about this online conversation moving offline. And I think that is really an example of the offline movement joining the online spaces. How about you, Madison?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of like anger, but also just like the feeling of seeing things happen and not being able to do anything. Specifically, it kind of started locally for me, not with like any big issues, but just like the way things were happening in like my school or my neighborhood or like city council and getting involved like gradually kind of. So
Right, that's really interesting about, online spaces being like an onboarding place where you can get more experience voicing your opinion. And I see on the Padlet here, we see people talking about people being motivated to voice their opinion against people maybe spreading misinformation or their own feelings of anger and helplessness, especially during this time we're all so disconnected. So we just published a post today about young organizers using social media to connect with other people about the issues they care about and really moving this political engagement online and taking advantage of different spaces. So on the flip side of this, we touched a little bit upon forces that can make it a little bit more difficult to share your voice. So I'm going to post a Padlet in the chat. And I'd love to hear maybe if something has prevented you from voicing your opinion on political issues online, or something that's had like a chilling effect on you expressing your voice, and maybe we could go a little bit deeper into what those are. Atticus, do you want to jump on this one?
Sure. Kind of interestingly, I feel like since Raven Madison might agree, since like second grade, I feel like I've been told that I should not share personal information online at all costs. Just don't. And I think that's kind of made me develop a bit of a tendency to just not to keep like my Instagram account very impersonal and not really talk about things that are important to me. I think also then there's an element of peer pressure, right? Like, how are your opinions going to be viewed by others?
Yeah, I think that's really legitimate. Someone posted in this Padlet about their job, maybe fear of saying the wrong thing and how you're viewed because of that. Raven, how do you feel about this question?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I would say that something that really prevents me from voicing my opinion or political issues online is maybe closing off doors to have those discussions with other people. So sometimes I may have an opinion that's really extreme, but generally when I decide to post something online, it's usually with the intent to be like more informative and not necessarily, it may have a hint of opinion, but the intent is not to, I want to have those conversations with people, and so I don't want to close them off by being super extreme with what I say online. So sometimes it prevents me from really saying my opinion, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's interesting. It can be hard sometimes, to walk the line between either being political, being partisan, or just expressing your political beliefs without it maybe closing those doors, like you mentioned, and maybe shutting some people out. Madison, how do you feel about this topic?
yeah, it's definitely a combination of like not wanting to spread misinformation or like to comment on something and be uninformed, because I have done that before in like the very early stages of like trying to get involved, and it feels really bad when you like say something without thinking about all of the possible like uh consequences or circumstances around it. So just like not wanting to hurt anyone and not wanting to close off that conversation, like Raven said.
Right. I think that's really important, especially as people have been mentioning in the Padlet when you're speaking to your family or people close to you, really thinking about the responsibility, but also the impact of expressing your voice in that way. So we're gonna go back to Raven, who's gonna talk a little bit about expressing voice on social media.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so this graph or this graphic kind of displays something that maybe we talk a little bit less about, which is maybe the voices that we're not hearing in political spaces online. So with that being said, the graph represents young people from the ages of 18 to 29 who agreed with the statement, "I'm scared to voice my opinion about social or political issues online because I don't think I'm qualified enough." And with that, while a majority of youth say that they've experienced various benefits of creating political posts online, more than a third, 37%, agreed or strongly agreed that they feel scared to voice their political opinions online because they don't feel qualified enough to do so. And also, while I'm saying this, maybe consider, what does that qualification mean? What factors would make you qualified? And so with that, more young people, about 40 young women, about 40%, report feeling that young men, about 32%, feel that they're less qualified, I should say, than men. And then only 26% of young Black women and young white men report feeling unqualified. Meanwhile, 43% of men of color indicated that they felt unqualified to express political opinions online. And 45% of young white women specifically expressed hesitation about posting online for this reason, which was higher than among young white men. But the opposite was true for women of color, which about 34% of whom agreed that they are not qualified enough. You can account some of these factors from being, higher rates of harassment and cyberbullying experienced by women online. But on the other hand, young women have been taking leadership roles in activist spaces, and our research has found that young women are more motivated to participate in politics. So it's this really interesting relationship between, seeing people out of the online space being really active and then not necessarily being represented in the voices that are online. And so maybe something to consider going forward is what other factors are possibly influencing these differences, and what does it mean for the posts that you're seeing and the opinions or posts that you're not seeing, and how does that maybe change the space in the political atmosphere? And with that, I'll pass it back to Peter.
Thank you so much, Raven. Right, I think that that's one real benefit for our survey research is we can kind of go deeper into these topics and see that, when we talk about expressing youth voice, it does differ for different people. So we're going to go into this closing question, and I'm going to share this last one as a Padlet as well for our audience to also chime in on. So the question here, and I want to make a note that next Tuesday's the election, and we're seeing that a lot of young people are being engaged, but also we want to look about engagement past elections, right? Past maybe one or a few days a year where you can express your voice in that way, but maybe other ways you can express your voice. So I want to ask our panelists, will you stay engaged in creating media about the issues you care about after the election? And maybe if you could talk a little bit more about how you will stay engaged.
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to stay engaged. I think that goes to just posting things, to also, like I mentioned before, talking to friends, generally just trying to give input on the issues I care about. I think also, and I kind of recommend everyone do this, where there's a lot all the time and it's easy to get burnt out. So be conscious of that and don't overwhelm yourself. And I definitely might take a step back a little bit, but I do plan on keeping creating things and expressing my opinion.
Right, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that note about sustainable civic engagement. And these issues really persist, and it's important to step in to taking leadership roles, but also allowing space for others to step up that way. Madison, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's easy to get burnt out, and I definitely have felt that. So I've been kind of like trying to just be mindful of like how I'm engaging and like how often. But I definitely do want to continue to engage and create media around issues and just having discussions.
Great, thanks. And Raven?
Yes, I do plan to, and I'm hopeful that young people will continue to. And as the data showed that we previously mentioned, the things that we care about expand beyond just a certain segment of things. And so these issues are going to continue to carry out for many, many years. So I'm hopeful, and I will definitely still be engaged.
Great, thank you, Raven. And I just want to mention some things we're seeing on the Padlet. So we see someone, talking about how this might be an election cycle, and more of an election season than just an election day. So really important to stay track all the up to date, accurate information about the election. Then we also see a note that was also mentioned by a previous speaker, Mr. Smith, about how local elections matter so much too. And we have posted a little bit on our website about different laws, but there really are so many ways for young people to be engaged on the local level, whether it's working as a poll worker before you even turn the age of 18, but we also see a lot of young people taking active roles on local campaigns as canvassers or being involved in social media. So it's really great. But thank you to our panelists and to my colleague Abby. I'm going to pass it back over to Michelle for our next speakers.
Thank you guys so much. That was really fascinating stuff. Amazing data, amazing work, Circle. Just really, really fascinating. Just so everyone knows, we're gonna have some time at the end for some questions. So feel free to chat them, and I'll make sure to get them in as best as I can. So let's bring in Elise Estrada, the Senior Director of PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs, and Becky Wandel, the Associate Youth Media Producer. They are in full Halloween mode. They did not give us a heads up, so none of us are, but they are, and they look absolutely fabulous. And I want to thank you so much for being here. I love working with you all, and I will mute and come back in a little bit.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to Circle and everybody who just presented. That was really fascinating just to see that data in detail and to hear how it connects to your experiences. Yes, so as Michelle mentioned, I'm the Senior Director for PBS NewsHour Student Reporting Labs, and I oversee the work and development of our national network of schools and partner stations. And I'm so lucky to be here today with Becky Wandel. Becky, what's your role at SRL?
So I am an associate youth media producer. Do you want me to talk a little bit more about that now, or are we going into the slide deck?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so that means that I work directly with our students and teachers. We work with hundreds of schools, thousands of students. I myself work with 30 schools all across the country. And what we've been doing with them during the pandemic is encouraging them to make their voices heard. So we've had a lot of success with video diary assignments where we're asking the students to turn the cameras on themselves and tell us what they're going through. So at first, what I was hearing a lot at a lot of different schools was the kids were a little lukewarm about the idea, and they were like, oh, like, who cares what I'm going through? Like, it's so, just typical. But what they realize when they start actually putting themselves on camera and getting feedback from me and from the audience that we share their content to is that nothing that they're going through is typical. And it's really important that they share what's happening around them. So we've heard them talking about their family members being sick. We've heard them talking about how they have to go to work during this pandemic, juggling that, how their mental health is doing. And so they really are learning along with us how important it is to share their voice. And I have a little anecdote. I work with a group of 6th graders in Akron.
Sorry, Becky, before you go into that,
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about just like how you get to work with those 6th graders, and also how you work with all of your schools, and also just to kind of like share that, something that Becky mentioned that I think is really important is that, especially in this moment, it's like really great to do to talk about like what you're going through, and also, you know, the fact that we're dressed up in our Halloween costumes because we have this like Morale Friday at our on our team, where we want to make sure that in this time when things are so unpredictable and uncertain, that part of taking care of our mental health is like just doing fun things like this. And that's, you know, another reason why we kind of went all out for Halloween. But, you know, as Becky was talking about, the work that we do is part of this National Youth Journalism program that is Student Reporting Labs. And we're also a public media initiative. So, you know, what Becky's going to get into is that we try to create these unique educational experiences through video journalism specifically that try to inspire young people to find their voice and engage in their communities. And we do this by connecting with students as often as we can to real world opportunities and real world stakes, I think most importantly through the PBS NewsHour and other partner media organizations, so that students can really see what it's like producing for bigger audiences. And on the flip side, our partners get to infuse their programming with really great youth-centered storytelling. And I think part of our mission is just making sure that we figure out how to add more youth voices to national conversations, because our ultimate vision is to help build the next generation of informed media creators and consumers. And what you see now on this slide is a working definition of how we talk to teachers about our program. You know, we're project-based and we're focused on video storytelling, community journalism, and civic engagement. And the network of schools that Becky was talking about are all across the country, and they can access our curriculum, and anybody can access our curriculum at studentreportinglabs.org. But Becky, tell me a little bit about, you know, those kinds of experiences where you're talking to students about media making and how that impacts the way that they see the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's really a process for them. Realizing that their voice does matter. It kind of goes back to what we were hearing from that circle data, that the more that you share, the more that you start to get convinced yourself that your voice is worth sharing. And so a lot of these kids don't really think that they have anything interesting to say, but me and their teachers, we kind of pull it out of them. And then you can really see a change in their understanding of the world and how they fit into it. And I work with this group of sixth graders, like I was saying earlier, in Akron, Ohio, and they are just so cute and I love them. And we were talking about school reopening, and they had a lot of different things to say about whether or not their school should be open or if it should remain virtual. And I asked them, I said, so a lot of people are talking about this in your community, right? And they were like, yeah. And I said, do you see a lot of sixth graders in those conversations? Do you see a lot of sixth graders on the news speaking with all these adults that are making these decisions? And they were like, no, of course not, because we don't see that ever. And so one of the real goals of Student Reporting Labs and public media is to just up the ante and make the media that we're sharing with the world even better and even more representative of the people that it's actually talking about. And so that's kind of the privilege that we have, is to include those young voices in these conversations rather than just hearing people talk about them. We want these kids to be talking about themselves and sharing their opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. And youth media producers like you, Becky, you're really the heart of our program, because you create spaces for students to feel comfortable experimenting with storytelling while they're learning these really valuable skills. And, you know, these are skills that no matter what students end up wanting to do, whether it is continue to create media, content, news, other types of information, the skills stick with them. And they're important communications and critical thinking skills that that can help anybody as they're trying to make decisions about the way that they want to live their life. So thank you so much, Becky, for joining me. And now I'm going to introduce Malik and our student panelists who you're going to hear from. So Malik Mercier, he's the host of GBH's Internet Expert on YouTube, and he's also a college student. So if you're on Twitch, and we're live streaming on Twitch now, as Kyle from NAMLE had said earlier in the chat, GBH is running a marathon of Internet Expert today after this event, so you can actually stick around to watch if you are on Twitch. And So since we're nearing the end of the election season, Malik and our panelists will be talking about election fatigue and really reflecting on their experiences as students and young people engaging in politics this year. But before they come up, we're going to play a video of students in different parts of the country talking about how they think politicians should engage young people in this moment. And these voices come through a special election curriculum we created. So let's watch.
The current generation is really big on the problems that they see, and they're being very vocal about it. It almost creates some tension, but I feel like if they're heard, if there can be some sort of acknowledgement of all the protests that are going on and all that, I think it will create the most engagement with the younger generations.
So I think that our local candidates don't really engage our youth, especially in our community, because most of the voters are in an older demographic. The youth don't really matter to their vote. They don't care or engage with them as much.
Make it a better world for not just people, but people that are minorities, people that are really struggling right now, people that are affected by COVID-19, people that are affected by the Black Lives Matter movement, all sorts of minorities. We have to make sure that everyone feels welcome here no matter what.
He could massively change the course of history, and we've seen with the protests, with the organizing, that Gen Z is determined to make their voices heard. I always hear about students saying, oh, I got involved in politics when my parent took me to this political event. Low-income students don't have that luxury. They have to learn about these things on their own, and that's why social media is such a powerful tool, because they can.
With the younger generation, they feel like, oh, I'm just a kid, I really can't change anything, I really can't do anything. But in reality, it's the exact opposite. You're the most important part of this, effort.
Hi everyone, I'm Malik Mercier, and give me 1 second to take my exciting background off. We were playing around with that for school, actually, for a little group project we're doing for the election, actually. So perfect timing, and glad to be with you all. I'm Malik Mercier. I'm the host of Internet Expert on GBH, and I'm a student journalist at Ithaca College in New York. I'm here with 3 of my peers today, spread out across America, to talk about the election and how they became civically engaged this year, as well as, probably most importantly, how they're going to process and cope as the election wraps up. If you're on social media and you're watching the news on a regular basis, this election seems to be everywhere all the time. And there is probably a part of you, at least there's a part of me, that just wants a simple result of who won on election night. But that might not happen, and that could be pretty stressful. We've talked about mental health a lot today, and I remember needing to take a mental health break after the midterm elections in 2018. I thought that was hard. First time voter problems, of course. It feels like the country will definitely need another mental health break, but if 2020 has taught us anything, disconnecting won't be easy. All of that said, I'm so grateful for our amazing panelists, because this is going to be the conversation that we all need in our lives. Let's go around and do some quick introductions. I want to start with Mary. Can you tell me where you're located, what school you go to, your grade, and one thing you're hoping to never have to talk about again when 2020 is over?
Well, I'm currently in Ohio, attending the University of Cincinnati. I'm currently in my 3rd year. And one thing that I'm tired of talking about is, I think, politics in general. I know this is like an ongoing conversation, but I kind of want to ease up a little bit.
Yes, I feel like that's really important, to just sort of chill just a little bit. I feel like that's going to be really nice. We can go to Bailey next.
Hi, my name is Bailey. I'm located in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I am currently a freshman at Western Kentucky University. And, not to sound like an echo chamber, but I think politics are really one of the things that I'll be glad to sort of put in the past year in 2020.
Very cool. And Nandita?
Hello, my name is Nandita Suri. I am a junior at the Gwinnett School of Mathematics, Science, and Technology in Georgia. And yeah, just to follow through again, politics is something I'm really ready, not entirely, but this particular election, I'm ready to just put in the past. There's a lot of negativity that has come with it. So yeah.
I feel that, especially the negativity, definitely want to push that away. So Mary and Bailey, I know that you're first-time voters. Have you both voted yet? What's your plan if not? And if so, what was that process of filling out that ballot and turning it in for you? We can start with Mary.
Well, I haven't voted yet. Me and my friends are going to carpool and vote together. So hopefully we all hold that motivation to want to get it done. And I feel like it's going to be a weight off of my shoulders. I'm just so ready to say, yeah, I did it. My voice is heard, and hopefully it follows through.
I have voted. I actually did a mail-in ballot. It was pretty stressful, not gonna lie. There was deciding who. I actually, sat there for a while, trying to decide if I should vote independent or not. It was a very stressful time, but I got it done. So
Awesome. I feel like that's what matters, but definitely appreciate you bringing that up, just because I know that there have been people that have thought about, whether or not they should vote independent, whether or not they should go Republican or Democrat with the candidates this year. So very interesting to hear. And I know, Nandita, you can't vote yet, but I'm super curious, what are the ways in which you've been active in your community during this election season?
So yes, I cannot vote yet. Unfortunately, I'm 16 years old. But I think this entire election season has really just showed me the importance of local elections. So I've really gone out and tried to participate more in my community. I was able to volunteer on a school board election campaign. So that was really interesting. And yeah, it's just given me a huge insight to how this entire process works.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear, and so cool that you're getting involved even though you can't vote. I think that's really inspiring to people that might be listening who might be in your same situation. So moving on, an important part of media literacy is understanding how different types of information makes us feel, and you all have noted it's been kind of stressful keeping up with this news cycle that just feels like it's rolling downhill sometimes. Has anything that you've seen on social media or the news given you anxiety recently? Bailey, we can start with you.
yeah. So currently in my state, in Kentucky, there's a fierce Senate battle going on between Mitch McConnell and Amy McGrath. And, you can't go, 1 minute on the internet here in Kentucky without seeing an ad by either one of them. And the battle has gotten so fierce that it's actually turned into like a slanderous, like, this person did this, well, this person's this, and this person's personality is this. And it's really just attacking, like, their personal life. And so that sort of gives me anxiety, or just kind of stresses me out to see where the future goes on from this. Like, is this how all, like, election campaign ads or campaigns are going to be ran, by attacking the person on a personal basis? I hope not, but from what I've seen here, it seems like it is, just because of how fierce it is.
Yeah, there are a lot of fierce races, and I hope that we can evolve to more than just attacks on each other in politics. Nandita, do you have a similar race happening near you?
Yes, we do, between John Ossoff and David Perdue in Georgia. And yeah, I guess that sort of is also my source of anxiety. These ads and stuff have gotten pretty slanderous, so it's kind of hard to figure out what's true and what's not. And I don't want to be spreading out the wrong information on social media or whenever I'm talking to my friends. So and whenever I look anything up on Google, it gives me like a million different facts and responses, or maybe not facts at all. So yeah, that's definitely a source of my anxiety. I don't want to be spreading misinformation.
Yeah, I feel like that's, really important, just wanting to tell the truth. I think that's something that's really, it matters. And misinformation and disinformation is out there. Mary, I know you've been talking with your friends about that and trying to help them not share that as well. What has that been like?
Oh my goodness, it's a lot. Like, we don't have as much local politician back and forth it's the bigger campaign, and it's those bigger articles and stuff. Like when you hear things about COVID, a lot of my friends have spreaded a lot of misinformation, and I'm like, if you just check the CDC or if you just do a little more research, you won't spread that misinformation and have people in a frenzy, or have people, not in a frenzy and not caring. So I feel like just spreading the correct information has been a battle of its own.
Yeah, I mean, and speaking of COVID-19, it's something that's so important that we, talk about and we do take seriously, right? And sometimes it is just a little bit more of a search that you need to do to get the right information. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to talk about the pandemic and how that has maybe shifted your thoughts on the importance of voting. Has it in any way maybe highlighted instances of voter suppression for you, or made you just see things more clearly? And we can start with, honestly, anyone who wants to take that.
I can go. So in my county, there was a big debate on whether all of the schools should be virtual or whether we should allow kids to go back in person. And I think it really just shed light on how much local politics actually matters, more specifically the school board. I didn't really know what the school board did before this year, but after everything that's happened, I've started to do a lot more research and actually follow these candidates closely because they're the ones that are actually impacting my day-to-day life.
That's really important. Anyone else?
Definitely local elections are, important, but I think one of the things that, COVID-19 has brought to my attention is just sort of, the long voting lines. I never really noticed that, but now that COVID-19 is here and, you're not supposed to be in a big group of people, well, now a lot of people are shedding light on these long voting lines. I mean, I saw a place in California that had a line that wrapped around the block. So I think that was really one thing that was brought to my attention as a result of COVID-19. And yeah.
I think COVID has brought up voter suppression, but it also just kind of, in general, opened my eyes. Like there aren't a lot of voting places in the neighborhoods that I know about or the neighborhoods that my friends live in. So it's kind of that there was already voter suppression without COVID. So how are we going to combat this? How are we going to get you to the polling station? So I think just that in general. Yeah.
You both highlight really important things. I mean, the lines, I actually just saw someone on Twitter post about how here in New York, someone's like handing out hot chocolate on the lines. That's so nice, but they are really, really long lines, which is why people are sort of trying to learn more and share what they can with those in line. So yeah, thank you all for that. And I really want our audience to also hear, I know Mary touched on this a little bit, how you've been talking to your friends and family about politics lately. Bailey, I'd love to start with you about how you've had conversations with family members who I hear think differently than you. And so what is that like?
Yeah, no, my family has a different political outview than I do. I lean a little left, they lean a little right, and so as you can imagine, that sparks a lot of arguments. And it's difficult because it's like you're my family member and I'm trying to understand you, but at the same time, it's like I don't really understand your side, and so I think a lot of the time it's just turns into like a 2-hour long argument about something, and then 2 hours passed and you're like nothing has changed, and so you sort of question like what was the point of me arguing with you for 2 hours if none of us budged anywhere, like we're not meeting in the middle anywhere. So that has sort of been just speaking with my family about politics is just trying to find a common ground, and so we don't end up arguing for 2 hours on something that we get nowhere on.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I'd love to hear, I think these conversations can be so polarizing. After these arguments, are you able to find common ground? Do you think you achieve it in any way?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think, it isn't going to change overnight, but I think at some point I just say to myself that I need to respect what they believe and they respect what I believe. Because at the end of the day, they aren't going to look at me and be like, well, you're not my son anymore because, you know, you believe this. They still respect what I believe and what I think. And so I just sort of end that on like a, you know, I respect what you believe, I guess, but I still want to have those conversations. So I think a lot of it is just about finding a common ground, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you being open to sharing that, because I feel like that's something that our audience can really benefit from hearing, just how these conversations go. And I also think that that's a big sort of pillar of our generation, is being able to sort of see each other for who we are, but also being able to find that common ground even when we do disagree. It's unclear what's going to happen on election day, and it also feels like everyone's preparing for the very much extremes on both sides. So, you know, no matter what happens, I know our generation will find that inspirational common ground. But what do you all think that Americans can do to bridge differences?
I think that we can bridge differences by just sitting down and listening to each other. Not just like, oh, I hear you, but actually listen and try to figure out why they feel that type of way. Like, why are you standing up for this particular thing? Oh, well, now I see. Maybe I should think of it differently. I think if you actually listen, a lot of the times your opinion will change. But when some people just like they act like they hear you, there's no like you're not understanding, you're not really comprehending that. So just putting it down to that level, like, well, I stand for this because, and I stand for this because, and you know, these people get hurt in this way, or these people benefit in this way, and just getting it to the nit and gritty of why.
Yeah, I think sort of going off of what Mary said, just communication is so important. Just having open conversations and talking. You don't have to agree with the other side, but again, listening is such a powerful tool.
Yeah, I really love that. And I've been trying to listen more too. I feel like it's such a key thing to do and to have communication. I want to bring in a comment that we got. Gregory Smith says that I'm always so impressed with youth who are able to voice their disagreements with their parents. It's not easy, and it's a sure sign of maturity when you can formulate your own opinions. So love that. And clearly you guys are connecting. So we'll head to our last question now. One thing we know for sure: we are in the total home stretch till Election Day, and there's going to be a lot of information coming at us over the next week about the election, the results, just all of it. I can imagine already the notifications on my phone. So, you know, you're all trying to stay civically engaged, it sounds like, but you're also, I'm sure, juggling school, possibly work, life, the pandemic, everything. So how are you keeping your head above water?
I think going into this final stretch, I'm just going to try and unplug a little bit, maybe take a break from social media because it's going to be filled with so much stuff because we are so down to the wire. And I just think, you know, talking about something other than politics just for this bit might be helpful, you know, just relaxing and trying to put my mind on other things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think unplugging is a thing that I'll be doing. But I think another part that I'll be doing is, you know, just finding a hobby or something that I really enjoy doing, you know, somewhere I can just go and I can just like, you know, relax. For me, that's, you know, skateboarding. So I like to go skateboarding and just unplug, rewind, and you know, chill out and just be myself.
Yeah, I'm just pretty much going to take the back seat and see what happens, but you know, also enjoy life because before COVID, I actually never thought about COVID. I never thought about living during a pandemic. This is history. So I'm going to try to make the best of it, but also stay safe.
I love that so much. That is just really inspiring, and I think that, you know, we are really, you've all just given some advice to everyone, I think, watching. I want to thank all of our panelists and some new friends. We've got to follow each other on Instagram for sharing your thoughts and personal stories. We talked about a lot of great things that connect back to the importance of media literacy. And one thing that resonates with me is that there are lots of things we can't control, like Mary highlighted with the pandemic, but there are some things that we can control, including how we respond to the information that seeks to influence us. I'm definitely going to remember that as I mentally prepare for the next few days. Good luck to all of you, and back to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Malik. That was an amazingly thoughtful and robust conversation. I so appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so much. We are going to bring up Madison Hall from Circle's Rep Us Now, where we're going to talk through a few action steps that we can take. And then we're going to have a little bit of time to do some questions and answers. So please do weigh in the chat if you have any questions for any of the participants. And I just want to call Madison in. Great. Hi, Madison.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. Okay, you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, like a lot of kids don't feel comfortable or qualified to post on social media. And I've definitely mentioned that it really does suck to be that person spreading misinformation. But there's a lot of ways you can engage with social media, even if you don't feel comfortable, or a lot of ways you can engage with the social issues, even if you don't feel comfortable necessarily being very vocal about it. So you can create media for other outlets to share. You can write op-eds or letters to the editor, create audio submissions for radio shows and podcasts. Sharing photos and videos is also helpful that are unique to how you see these issues. You can follow local news, you can follow journalists and people who are talking about what's going on near you on social media, and subscribing to newsletters just so that you're staying informed and knowing what's going on. You can help other people understand the youth perspective by responding to things that you read in tweets or however you feel like responding. You can comment on articles if that's an option. And you can share recommendations for issues that you want to see covered by the media outlets that you follow. It's also really important to encourage other young people to get involved. So if you know someone who's being active in their community, you can definitely share their story and support them any way you can, so that we can all participate in changing the narrative that young people don't care about social issues and that we are paying attention. And lastly, you should also encourage organizations and campaigns that you care about to listen and value the youth perspective, so that they can understand how important it is and give them some recommendations for how they can do that.
That's fabulous, Madison. Those are great suggestions. So we have about 10 minutes left of our closing event. So I want to call everyone back onto the screen, and I'm going to just check the chat to see if there's any questions. I sure have a few of my own. So please join us. This was really unbelievable. I just want to commend everyone's just thoughtfulness. I said it before. It's just really amazing and inspiring and exciting to hear from all of you. I want to just start this little ending with one of the things I was really taken with was how a lot of you feel very nervous and very anxious about spreading misinformation. And I actually want to ask you, Mr. Smith, because I wonder if we need to do something differently when we teach students about misinformation and disinformation, so that they understand how important how to decipher information. But I'm worried that they're nervous. Like, I'm worried that I don't want to make them more stressed out. So I wonder if you could share based on what you heard.
Well, what was said here isn't an uncommon thing with a lot of the youth, because of, I think, social media in general. There's so much of a microscope on every move they made. So the fear of blundering or saying the wrong thing and hearing the repercussions. So I think it's less about what can we do to help these students, and more figuring out a way to kind of normalize when somebody says something that you don't need to attack them. Let their opinion be their opinion. And if you disagree, then state why you disagree and move on. I think the bullying and harassment is what our students fear more of than the actual my opinion and my content. Because when I speak one-on-one with my students, they're very frank and candid with me. When I ask them to speak in front of the class, they shut down.
Hmm. Does that resonate with any of you as students? I see a lot of nods. Yeah. So we have a question. Oh, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I feel as though like that was kind of directed towards me a little bit because he usually asks me to speak in front of the class.
That was his subtle way to put this in the public domain. So a question from the audience is, what do you guys consider to be a good source for reliable information? Malik, I'm going to put you on the spot. Where do you go for your information?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of, I mean, there's a few places. I definitely just first off know the news organizations that I trust. I think like the New York Times and just, you know, CNN, but then also I think knowing when there's a show that's opinionated on network news and being like aware of that is something that I think needs to be talked about more. And so that's one thing that I just try to keep an eye out as well, because nowadays sometimes shows look like news, but they're not. And they're political commentators that are hosting it. And then also, just I think there's also a fact checker called PolitiFact, and I think I'm not sure if it's like with MediaWise or Pointer. I feel like it's in between a few brands, but that's been really helpful in just seeing, you know, they have like a truthometer and seeing what's like super true or what's false. And then there are things that are also more nuanced and sometimes just taken out of context. So all of that.
Anyone else want to tell us where they get their information, what sources they're trusting these days? Atticus, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, totally. New York Times, definitely. I also listen to a lot of podcasts. I run, so I'll listen to podcasts. Like, I love The Daily. Pod Save America is great. It's a little bit more commentary, but stuff like that.
It's interesting. I was just listening to the latest Pod Save America, and they actually have a lot of data right now about people's relationship with the news and media. Really fascinating stuff if anyone wants to check it out, just about how even partisan news, how that impacts the way people, you know, think. I think a lot of the information is kind of intuitive, like, yes, that makes sense, but they have data now, which is really interesting. I don't know if you heard that episode. So questions, I have one. What are the panelists thinking about what will happen after November 3rd? Are they concerned about that and have any plans on how they'll respond? I'm going to put Bailey on the spot for that one. So what do you think's going to happen after November 3rd?
I really don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think right now I am more concerned with just focusing on what's coming up, and then I'll worry about what's going to happen afterwards.
Yeah.
But
great life philosophy, actually. Anyone else have any thoughts about what they think might happen after November 3rd? Okay, we have another question actually about teaching propaganda. So Jeanette asked, would teaching the techniques used to create propaganda be helpful, like repetition and messaging with emotional words? I guess one of the first questions is, do you learn about propaganda and teaching propaganda in school? Just Raven, I see you nodding. Tell me, in what context have you been learning about propaganda?
I would say honestly in every single high school class, or all through my high school experience, in all my social studies or anything like that, we always had a section on propaganda and the power of propaganda. And then I guess, if the question is teaching, like how to teach it, or there was a question in there, wasn't it, about like
the techniques in which,
yes,
how you propaganda.
That's useful. Yes, I think it is useful. I think it's also helpful to learn about the intent, like the disinformation aspect of it and how that relates to today.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I'd like to just ask all the student participants, If there was one thing you knew you wanted adults to know about the 16 to 20-year-old demographic, what is it that you want us to know? And I'm gonna just pick on you. Let's go to Nandita first. What is one thing you wish adults knew about your generation?
I think sort of just listening is important. Yes, we're young and we're still learning, but I think it's still important to take our opinions seriously and actually listen, because these are things that we care about right now. And usually the things we care about now, we'll still care about later. I can't speak for everyone, but yeah, I think we're all still learning. So again, making mistakes, I think that's just a normal part of it, but it's still important to take younger people seriously.
Josh, do you have anything you want adults to know?
I would say that it's important to always have an adult to back you up and give you that push and support. That could actually help the student or the person my age go a very long way.
Wonderful. Madison, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's important to just realize that like we have opinions and they are valid, and taking them seriously is very important.
That's a great point. Bailey?
I think something I relate with was what Nandita said. Really just making mistakes is a part of learning. And I know I've made a lot of mistakes.
Me too.
And I think that just, hearing us out and realizing that we are gonna make mistakes. I mean, I'm 18, I don't know everything, but just that.
How about you, Mary?
Nandita and Bailey took the words right out of my mouth. Like, we need to be heard, and we also will make mistakes. Like, we're young adults. So, understanding that we're still learning, and you can't just assume that we know everything or assume that we don't know everything. We're just like right there in that good spot to go either way. So you gotta be patient with us.
Atticus?
Yeah, I think totally like listen to us. I also just wish there was a little bit less of like the divide between adults and youth, where it's like the youth are their own kind of like unpredictable entity. I don't really feel like that's true. I think if we kind of had a conversation where everyone was talking about more equally, it would be a lot more productive.
Agree. I'm so glad we're recording this because I want to like write everything you're saying down. And then Raven and Malik, Raven, and then Malik, I'll pull it to you to wrap it all up.
I would just say that I wish adults kind of understood that it feels very overwhelming right now. At least a lot of the people that I talk to, just the expectation that's on young people to be civically engaged is kind of a lot, and also to take on these big problems that our world is facing.
Yeah. Malik, final thought.
Yeah, I'll just say that, I've done reporting and just sort of looking at different sides, and I feel like everyone feels like Gen Z is on their side, which is really, really funny. But I think that our group of our generation is really diverse. And I think at the same time, we've been able to really have empathy in a way that other generations, I think, haven't. I think it's sort of like built into our DNA because of the experiences that we've had with digital and getting to see things that I think are like so mundane and normal and like stories on social media. And just being able to see those different things has allowed us to, I think, be more open to hearing from other people. So I feel like, we're a really different generation in a way, but it's because of all of the access that we've had, and we know that we need to use that access in order to make a difference.
Absolutely. Thank you. I am just completely overwhelmed. This is the perfect conversation to end Media Literacy Week. I want to thank you again, all of you, for being here, for being engaged, for sharing your thoughts with us. It was really, really powerful. And thanks again to my wonderful partners, Elise and Abby and Peter, for all your work in making this happen. And the partnership that we have I am just incredibly grateful for it. Thank you again to Danelle and Kyle for all of your hard work this week. Thank you to the NAMLE community and all of you who participated in any way with Media Literacy Week. Let's continue to work together to make this world media literate. Please go vote. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, NAMLE.
Thank you for having us, and please vote.
Please vote, vote, vote.